the DST, the panelists, the invited guests in all your capacities, ladies and gentlemen, and to all our esteemed viewers that are going to be watching on the various channels that are live, that is NTV, UBC, and BBS Terefina. We welcome you all to this joint national post-budget speech dialogue for the financial year 2019-2020, which will be starting in a few days' time. That's about 10 days from now, and it's the first of its kind. And like I said, the reason why we have to keep time today is because we're going to be moving up country to ensure that the people outside of Kampala, outside of the central region, are as well engaged and get to know about their budget. They get to be part of the discussion. Kabale will be representing the Western region, and that's where the dialogue is going to be. Hoima will be for the Mid-Western region. Arua is going to cover up for the West Nile, so the people of West Nile will be converging in Arua. Lira will be for the Greater Northern region, and Soroti will, of course, be representing the Eastern and Karamoja region. So you know exactly, if you're going to be part of the dialogues up country, which particular one you want to be a part of and where exactly you should be going. Now, as known, the minister did deliver the budget, of course, for the financial year 2019-2020, which is a figurative translation of the government's planned development priorities for the next financial year. There's so many priorities, there's so many things that ought to be done, but of course there has to be prioritization in allocation of resources, and that's what exactly government did, of course, with Parliament approving the figures and approving the budget, which does start Monday, 1st July. And that's going to be less than 10 days from now, 10 days from now. And that's the biggest, of course. This is our biggest budget ever recorded, which is at about 40,487 billion. What does that represent? That the economy is growing, that things are getting better, that we need much more to do? You and I will get to answer those questions during our plenary discussion. And of course, this here is not only organized by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, but also in partnership with the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. We're very, very glad. And also during the budget month, part of the activities were sponsored and supported by Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. We can give them a hand clap. I think they've done well. And also the tax collector, that other organ that many of us or many of the people outside dread so much. That's the Uganda Revenue Authority. Let's also give them a round of applause. And they're very much represented in the House. So ministry has been partnering with the two to make sure that we are all here. I won't go into the resource allocation, but our focus of discussion today, if you are still asking yourself, will be discussing the budget for the financial year 2019-2020. It's already past years, but that does not say we cannot talk about it. And that discussion is going to be in relation to Uganda's development agenda and what is required to achieve that agenda. We were told sometime that we are there, but we didn't move. I don't know what happened. We stagnated somewhere because of a number of reasons. We also will be discussing on actions that are taken and development progress so far achieved during this financial year, which is going to be ending on the 30th. So what the monies that were appropriated in the last financial year, what have the monies done? That will be a point of focus today as well. The outstanding development challenges, of course, we plan. It's one thing to plan, but it's another thing to fulfill as well. And there are always challenges along the way. So we'll be talking about those. The economic growth strategy, of course, sharing in-depth pillars that will underpin growth in this financial year, 2019-2020. It's one thing for the minister to say we're going to be growing at this particular rate, and it's another thing to also actualize that. The budget priority interventions for the next financial year, of which some we already know, will be also our focus, and financing the budget strategy. It's 40 trillion. We may be excited about the monies, but where are they going to come from? That's the question. And you as a taxpayer have cause to worry. Do you have cause to worry or not? Do we have financing options? Will we be able to raise the money? As we continue to exert pressure on Uganda Revenue Authority to collect the monies, do we even have a tax base that can be able to help us get all those monies with all the tax evasions and avoidances that we do have? So with that, I won't be taking a lot of time. I would like to request the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, Mr. Patrick Uchailap, to start up our day. And he will be giving us key highlights, of course, of the budget and from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development perspective. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, Moderator, for your usual excellent level of presentation of the purpose and scope of the discussions in these live meetings. I am representing the Permanent Secretary of Treasury in this discussion to highlight the budget that has already been received so that we set the stage for us now to distill and discuss further the areas that we need to strengthen, your ideas, and how we need to monitor and manage the budget together. I will, under about 9 slides, be able to summarize it because it's not my intention to reread the budget, but just to pick those highlights that I think will facilitate this discussion and also provide impetus for us to go out to the regions to discuss the budget in detail. By way of introduction, what is the purpose of this post-budget dialogue? 2 reasons. One is for us to receive a positive exchange of ideas to increase stakeholders' appreciation of the budget, understanding of the budget, and how the budget will be able to impact on their operations. Number 2, we want to receive alternative views from you, the stakeholders.
You'll be using this as your click. This is the forward button. This is the forward button.
Okay. Which one?
It's the forward button. Okay.
Yes. The alternative views that we can use to improve our budget in subsequent planning and budgeting processes. So we are focusing on this in order for us to be able to receive your alternative views. We don't have a monopoly of ideas. That's why we are consulting you. Therefore, the first question I want us to answer that I'm placing before you in the purpose of discussion is, what do we need to enhance industrialization and to ensure that growth is inclusive? Our economic growth strategy certainly will be able to answer that. We see from our long-term strategy that the goal is to move towards middle income, and I think the initial target was by the year 2020. I think we're moving there, but we have reasons why we are now at $825 per capita, just at the eve of the year 2020. But I think with the progress that we're making this year, we never know, we can easily hit it. What is required to increase our income? I'll be able to lay bare the interventions that the budget has put in place for us to be able to take action as citizens in order to increase our participation and increase our incomes. With respect to actions taken and progress so far made, we have consistently implemented actions to address infrastructure deficit, which we view as a vanguard and a basis for economic growth, without which, forget about what you are talking about in terms of appropriate technologies, appropriate infrastructure for you to move the economy forward. The economy certainly has recovered, growing at over 6% per annum over the last 3 financial years. Income per capita has increased to now 825, in spite the high population growth rates as well. The quality of labor force improved, with the proportion of those with post-secondary education increasing from 7.5% in 2013 to 13.6% in 2017. Economic transformation certainly is taking place and taking shape, with a share of industry to GDP increasing to 21%, up from 11.3% in 1986. Export earnings have improved, and as you saw from the minister's statement and budget speech, we have now a surplus with region. I think we need to sustain or even make this level much higher. We have a bigger potential to do so. I'll be able to summarize what we need to do in that area. There are quite a number of factories, as you saw, that were established, and opened, and that is a source of inspiration for the private sector then to seize opportunities to transform what we produce in this country, or with some little imports as well, in order to increase our capacity for manufactured products with high value, in order to earn resources for sustained economic growth. What are the challenges that the minister enumerated? And I think this is a very topical issue, which we need to brace and put our heads together. Unemployment. Following good strides in provision of social services, over 600,000 Ugandans are joining the labor market each year and creating the need, therefore, for jobs. We have attempted in the financial year to highlight areas that we think will grow the economy and absorb this labor force. But I think we come to you to share ideas based on your experience, based on your expertise, to enrich or strengthen those areas further in order for us to continuously absorb this large labor force. Widening income inequality between rural and urban areas. And I think some studies even show, even within urban areas, there are categories of inequalities of people with incomes, leading to high rate of urbanization, where people rush from villages to the cities in hope for better facilities, and thus creating problems for congestion. Remember the figure the minister quoted from World Bank statistics. Traffic jam alone, border borders inclusive, create a cost to the economy each year of about $800 million in time consumed. And for those of you who believe time is money, really certainly know how much the traffic jam is costing. And of course the fuel, because the moment the engines are rumbling and you're not going nowhere, you are consuming while standing, no work done. And then malnutrition and unhealthy lifestyles is what also the minister highlighted as one of the big challenges that we need to face head on. The good news about this is that I think if a mindset change is put in place with appropriate inputs of knowledge on how we can live better lifestyles to mitigate the adverse effects of those diseases, then I think we should be able to address this challenge quite fast and pretty fast, because first, it affects the people with resources, and secondly, it affects people who are educated. They know English, they know common languages, they know maybe French, etc., etc. So this is an area that I think if all together we come together, we should be able to address this challenge faster than what everybody would be thinking about. What are the economic growth strategies? I promised to tell you a summary of the growth strategies that the minister put in place. Expanding industrial base of the economy by building on the success already made in production of basic products, cement, tiles, fruit processing, even processing grain to the next level, from maize to posho, from rice perhaps to other meals that are made out of that, etc., etc. Beef products to sausages, etc., etc. These are the areas that we need to build on in order to quickly expand the industrial base on the basis of the large foundation, which is 68% agricultural sector in this country, in order to even pull the larger parts of this country into the production stream along the agricultural value chain. Exploiting natural resource endowments with environment protection in mind. And the minister did emphasize the environmental cost of mismanaging environment. When it rains now in Kampala, you see what happens. In some places, floods are already coming. There are no trees. I saw the ED of NEMA here. I think we maybe need martial action in that area in order to ensure that the vagaries of weather, which are real with us now, are addressed with the ferocity they deserve. And it's also a constitutional command in the articles of the Constitution, the principles of the Constitution, that the environment must be managed in a manner that's sustainable for the current and future generations. Since it's a command, therefore, we must do whatever it takes to implement the laws, bylaws, etc., etc., in order to tackle the aspects of environment. And this is something that we must dig in as a matter of urgency because we're already late. You see houses being washed away because people are built along the waterways. Water cannot be stopped. It's innocent, but can destroy a massive building. I saw a shop in Bugolobi that Shell, the guys were partaking of what was in the shop because the water came from the flood and opened the door, poured out everything in the shop, and then people partook of that. Such losses could be avoided if we dealt with environmental issues squarely. Providing affordable financing for production and business support is another anchor with respect to this area. And you heard the minister talk about the capitalization of UDB. We are towards now 500 billion that we set up there, and as well as providing a good environment for us not to distort the interest rate equilibrium in the economy by borrowing too much from the domestic market. What are the enablers of growth that the minister did mention in his budget speech? Enhancing key primary growth sectors is one area by increasing infrastructure access. We are not going to move away from infrastructure anytime soon. For those of you who think we're going to move away from that, no way. Until the critical mass of infrastructure has been attained, we need to stay in there, and you'll see the benefits. And they're already beginning to bear with respect to economic growth, sustainability. Human capital development is an area that we need to tackle with respect to health and education. And obviously, without peace, security, and good governance, the environment within which income and stay peacefully is certainly not guaranteed. So a lot of emphasis is being laid in there as well. Let me quickly go through the key priority interventions before I shut up. Enhancing the primary growth centers. I talked about industrialization, commercialization of agriculture, tourism development and promotion, marketing, product development, incentives to developers of tourism facilities, and upgrade and development of tourist infrastructure is one of the low-hanging fruits that we need to seize, because tourism is already, even with the little investment in tourism, is beginning to be a high income earner with respect to export earnings. And why is it important that we need to lay emphasis on these areas that bring us a lot of export earnings? Number one, it provides us with opportunities for us to service external debts, which are the bigger part of our debt portfolio. Number two, it helps us mitigate the adverse effects of foreign exchange fluctuation on account of the trade imbalances. And number three, it sustainably helps this country deal with the comparative advantages that they have to continuously earn increased incomes from these areas. So those triple effects are certainly something that we should not ignore. And then the key priority area that I have here as the last part of the bullet is development and commercialization of minerals, oil and gas sector. With respect to increasing infrastructure access and reliability, I think we have seen a larger allocation on the district urban and district urban and community access roads, industrial parks. Transmission lines to evacuate power from the dams will also be continuously improved. In the area of human development, the means are emphasized: skilling, the functionality of, improving the functionality of the health centers and education systems countrywide, and did mention actions that are going to be taken with respect to district health hospitals, and then revitalizing nutrition education and improvement of safe access to water. And I think I did mention the issue of peace and security, which should not be taken for granted, but it's a basic anchor for the very existence of this progress that we're making. How do we intend to finance? I think the moderator asked the question. This development strategy. The minister announced certainly a blend of financing. Domestic revenue, 20.5 trillion. And of this, the taxman, without increasing tax rates, but dealing with efficiency issues with respect to IT and also the mechanism for collection and transmission of these resources real time to the central bank and consolidated fund, is expected to get into the kitty of that 20 trillion, about 19 trillion. While non-tax revenue, this is what the agencies collect, is supposed to raise about 1.6 trillion. Tax measures for the next financial year aim at improving our tax GDP ratio and also, as I said, closing the loopholes in administration. Modest adjustment in tax rates to ensure progressivity. Tax incentives to selective enterprises to boost private sector investments, especially in agro-processing, other manufacturing, tourism development. The other part of financing, as I said, is a blend between domestic revenue and borrowing. Borrowing and public debt is a very topical issue for everybody. I must assure, and the minister did assure the whole nation, that debt remains sustainable in the medium to long term. And the figures are all there for us to examine, distill, tear apart, come to understand. We shall not tire to explain these ratios and why we maintain the position that debt is still sustainable despite the increased borrowing. GDP remains at 41.8% of GDP in nominal terms, and 32%, about 32%, 31.7% of GDP in present value terms. I don't want to round up here because a round up of a figure in this kind of calculation is a massive amount of money. So let me not round up, otherwise it will mean a different thing altogether from what the minister read. Much as the borrowing for next financial year will be used to finance our infrastructure under the roads, energy, petroleum, and work sectors, as well as education and health infrastructure. What do we intend to do continuously without compromising to ensure sustainability of the debt position? We need, at the same time as we borrow and contract debt, to have timely execution of loan finance projects to increase our ability to pay back. And if you combine it with what I said previously, the need to expand the economy, particularly for exports, then a combination of these, together with timely implementation, certainly sits in well with respect to us dealing sustainably with meeting our debt obligations with respect to external borrowing. We also have a strategy of contracting loans, basically to finance our deficit by contracting loans on concessional terms and on a long-term basis. We also intend, as a strategy, to diversify our financing options and aligning the nature of borrowing to characteristics of projects, e.g., commercial loans will be directed to self-financing projects and largely on infrastructure areas that have the capacity to earn money to help the Treasury be able to raise resources timeously to be able to pay the loans. Having looked at the strategy and how to finance the strategy, in summary, what does the budget look like in terms of allocations? Works and transport sector has allocation of 6.4 trillion next financial year, up from 4.4 trillion this current financial year. You know of bombardiers, they're already here. It's part of that equation. And then, of course, enhancing the roads that I mentioned. Security sector, an allocation of 3.6 trillion next financial year, up from 2.1, in order to deal with sustaining peace and security, which I said is your vanguard for whatever we do in the economy. Education sector, an allocation of 3.4 trillion, up from, next financial year, up from 2.8 trillion. Again, to deal with aspects of infrastructure and improvements in that sector. Energy sector, allocation of 3 trillion, next financial year, up from 2.4. Basically to deal with transmission lines, etc., in order to support our strategy. Justice, law and order, at an allocation of 1.7 trillion, up from 1.3. It's a marginal increase of 0.4 to deal with dispensing justice in a fair and rapid manner. Health sector, no, it can't be. Yes, 6.4 trillion in next financial year. No, it can't be. I have the figures in the head. This is now an addendum to the budget. And the person who is going to defend this number and this slide is certainly the one who was run with the corrective figure. Yeah, it can't be 6.4. 2.589 trillion from 2.3 trillion. Yeah, because we are upgrading some of the health center 2s to health center 3s. You saw the construction going on. Accountability sector, to deal with issues of monitoring the performance of the budget, is 1.6 trillion, up from 1.1 trillion. Local government sector, 1.3 trillion, up from 0.9 trillion. Water and environment has an allocation of 1.1 trillion, up from down from 1.2 because some projects ended anyway. That's an area, by the way, National Water and Sewage Corporation under that sector is the most efficient in terms of implementation of the projects. And I think we're using it as a model for how other projects must be implemented. They implement projects on time and cost. And they monitor the performance of the contractor right from the time we start identification of the project. How I wish all the rest of the sectors can get the example. I think we should be able to move with national water everywhere and use them as the bishops to preach the gospel of efficiency in public sector management and improvement of project performance. So they finished a number of projects on time. Nakibo Channel, the other one, Lubiji, etc., on time. So the donor project element there, they deserve a clap really. I don't think they clapped when the minister was reading the budget, but I think this is now my command. You should clap for them. Agriculture sector, to deal with the issues that we are talking about, is 1.1 trillion, up from 0.9. Accountability sector is repeated twice. Is it because that's where I come from? Yeah. Director budget will answer that. And then tourism sector, 193.7 billion, up from 32 billion. There are quite a number of marketing strategies that were put in place. We are surprised that 32 billion was able to bring in about over $1.4 billion. That's efficiency with which the tourism sector is working because private sector is in there. What do? Support them to do the marketing. Zone the areas, get high quality marketing people to market Uganda as a tourist destination. And also, we deal with aspects when the tourists are attracted after that marketing. What other issues must we deal with? Infrastructure, water, etc. So I think this, if you want efficiency, this is an area where efficiency can easily be gained without necessarily putting more money. more money does not necessarily mean to result in efficiency, but the way you use the money. But this sector, with a little injection, can create wonders for us. Science, technology, and innovation, 186 billion, up from 184 billion. That's a summary of the allocation of the resources next financial year. And I think somebody is going to ask quickly, when I total these numbers, even after correction, it doesn't come to 40 billion. Why have you hidden the other 6-point-something billion? I mean trillion. That is what we call debt refinancing from domestic borrowing. You borrow domestically to finance what matures in the financial year domestically. But the strategy also in future is to see whether we cannot start maybe after the infrastructure investments, etc., and our revenues are good. We should start now. Actually, when they mature, we pay off instead of rolling over. That we are doing now. So that one is not available for any other expenditure. That's why I deliberately had to summarize that. So when you add that one together with domestic refinancing, the figure comes to the 40-point-something trillion that you're talking about. In conclusion, therefore, I'm sorry I've taken a lot of your time. It has become another budget speech, but I thought I should emphasize those areas for discussion. That the development strategy aims at accelerating industrialization and growth that is inclusive. Point number one. Point number two, public debt remains sustainable, but we must discuss it. 3, complementary measures being undertaken to diversify our financing options and increase domestic revenue mobilization to reduce reliance on debt. We have a domestic resource mobilization strategy, which I think the top management of the ministry approved 2 weeks ago, which is going to drive the strategy for revenue mobilization, of course working together with you. That strategy was developed with private sector, civil society, development partners, as well as ourselves and experts in that area, so that we shall be able to increasingly raise revenue for financing our expenditures and minimize financing of the deficit through borrowing, whether external or domestic. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to submit the summary for discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Ochalap, for giving us that. I think it was brief, more brief than the budget speech itself, because the budget speech took us more than 2 hours. Yeah, and this was in less than 30 minutes. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is going to be from one of the other organizations that has enabled that we have this day come to pass, and that is the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, also giving us some of the highlights. And Mr. Patrick Mukunda, Julius Mukunda, I beg your pardon, will as well be coming back on the panel, so you will have time to fire some of those questions as they continue to pin Ministry of Finance and all the others. We will also be asking quite a number of questions. So Mr. Julius Mukunda, who is an economist and budget analyst, I think you've seen him on many of your TV stations. Well, thank you. Welcome. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Good morning. All protocols observed. Once again, we are here to conclude the budget process. And we've expected this process since it started in July last year. And we are coming to the end. And as civil society organizations, I think a number of things we think are very good in this budget, but also a number of risks we think government needs to look at to ensure that the 40 trillion we are talking about can deliver what the Ugandans are expecting. I will therefore begin with what did we think are the opportunities in this 1920 budget. First and foremost, as the DST talked about, for the first time, the agriculture sector has hit a trillion budget. And for us having the biggest majority of the Ugandans in the agriculture sector, I think for us that is a plus. Now we can have a debate on where this money is going. But I think there was one important element we identified we felt that was so crucial for farmers. And that was the storage facilities and post-harvest facilities. I can tell you this is one thing farmers have been looking forward to, so that we don't have to sell our maize at 200 kilograms. You can just imagine. Although we know it's only in Munyangabu, Chibuku, Kumi, Chenjonjo, Toronko, and Nakaseke districts, we are hoping that probably in the next other years it can be able to catch up. But I think that's a good starting point. Another important element we found out is that this budget also comes at a backbone where we have been pushing for how can we facilitate our small-scale enterprises to produce more for the market. We are glad that currently Uganda is the guru in the region in terms of trade, and we have a trade surplus of $557 million US. Why is this so? It is so because, as the minister said rightly, we are increasingly seeing, even in our supermarkets, I'm the advocate of banana juice and the bushera packed in the supermarkets. Why? Because I know who grows that millet and I know who drinks it. But at the same time, it is a value addition, and you can export some of these products across the region. As such, we believe that the measure taken by government, especially on increasing import duty on some of the selected trade items, will encourage local production so that at least we can have more of our SMEs producing more and getting more money. The other element, of course, is I'm just hearing also that our revenue collections, we are likely to hit a surplus. And I think for me that's again very encouraging. Why? Because once we are able to get enough money, then this debate of debt probably can be able to situate it properly and see how we can overcome it. And as such, I think it's very crucial that we encourage our revenue collection measures. Of course, more things are in the budget, but at the same time, let us also look at what needs to be done in order to sustain, to be able to get the dividends out of the 40 trillion budget. A number of things we are cautioning government on. One is issues to deal with credit access. Credit access. We very well know that the small enterprises, there are two biggest challenges. One is access to credit and the cost of credit. We are aware that government is capitalizing UDB. We are also aware we have a facility called Agricultural Credit Facility. But these facilities are for the big companies, the big boys in the market. The small and medium enterprises are not likely to access that. So what is the government going to do to ensure that our small-scale enterprises can be able to have cheap and affordable credit to expand their businesses? It is very crucial for industrialization. The other important element, of course, is the whole issue around fiscal decentralization. There is a debate, and I think it is important that we address this, that only 13.6% of our budget is likely to go to the government level. And we're going to say, oh, no, they don't have capacity, they have issues. Yes, we know that. But why is it that we cannot address their problems so they can be able to and easily? For example, we know that 1.9 trillion is part of the subvention for local governments. Most of this money stays at the center. It is supposed to go to local government. We could start with that to enable local governments to deliver services to the communities directly, rather than spending money here at the headquarters and we are spending money on behalf of Gisoro district. Ministries, departments, and agencies need to let go that money so that money can go to districts and districts can serve their populations. The other item, of course, is for us the issue that has been and needs to be tackled is the issue of supplementary budgeting. And I think when I talk about this, you just know, even towards the end of this, we haven't finished the financial year, but we know last month, requests are already in place at Parliament to have a supplementary budget. If we cannot stick to our rules, then I think the 40 trillion budget might be spent on something else, considering the fact that we are entering into a very, very sensitive period of politics. One of the things we have urged is that definitely supplementary budgeting, we can't avoid that. But supplementary budgeting is defined properly. It must be unabsorbable, it must be unavoidable, it must be unpredictable. So when an accounting officer decides to promote his own staff in the middle of the financial year, when an accounting officer decides to start recruitment and enhance salaries in the middle of the financial year, none of that money constitutes a supplementary budget. Supplementary budgeting distorts the budget process. We have no reason to be here because if at the end of the day money is going to be spent in another choice. We would therefore love to see more of Minister of Finance resisting the pressure from supplementary budgets. In fact, we would wish that you stop defending supplementary budgets in Parliament and let accounting officers go there themselves. The other element is capacity to deliver on project and execution. DSST, we talked about the 6.4 trillion in roads. But we are worried that our capacity to deliver on these projects is still very wanting. We know very well, for example, that according to National Planning Authority Certificate of Compliance, this was identified as a major risk on all major spending sectors. For instance, the energy sector, the grid rural electrification project only absorbed 21% of the funds released due to failure to satisfy project implementation benchmarks required by the development partners. And the list is long. So what are we going to do to ensure that we have the capacity, that the money we are going to borrow is growing, we are going to use it rightly? Lastly, for me, I think is the question of debt. And I think I can't live without talking about debt. Yes, we have now the usual story that we are sustainable. And I think we can't defeat that because of the numbers. But we know that there are countries whose debt to GDP ratio is above 200%. Should they get worried, like Japan? Should the USA get worried because their debt to GDP is above 100%? I don't think so. For us, why are we worried? We are worried because, one, of our capacity to absorb the money that is coming, which means that the undisbursed loans that are out there, we can't use, we are still paying money on it. We are worried because we have almost a 3.3 trillion in terms of paying interest. Remember, if URA is going to collect 20, you have a 3.3 trillion to go for interest payment. How much are you remaining with for yourself? We are worried about that. And lastly, we are worried because of some of the conditions attached to some of these loans. That's what is worrying us. We would still be worried if our GDP, our debt to GDP is below 10% when we are not utilizing it well. In fact, I would not be worried if it is 100% and we are very efficient in implementing our projects. So I think we need to be able to address that. On terms of debt too, is that we know government has the capacity to get the Chinese loans, the British loans, the World Bank. Why don't you leave the Ugandan market to small scale and medium enterprises? They are the small players, you are the big player. You have all the clout, the money, the power to get all these big monies. Get out of the domestic market. That is the only reason why our interest rates are still so high, above 20%. And that's why the mortality rate of most of our small-scale enterprises is still so high, because access to credit is very expensive and the cost of credit is also very high. As such, we would have loved to see more of you reducing the appetite of the domestic market and increase your appetite on the international market. In that way, we know at least there is some equal play in the credit market. In conclusion, therefore, we know there are very much opportunities to deliver better quality services in Uganda. However, the risks are still alive, and we need to adjust to ensure that we achieve the targets that we have. As government implements the 2019-20 budget, We call upon URA, and of course, we call upon Ugandans to ensure that we pay our taxes, and also URA collects taxes diligently, and more importantly, that those responsible for spending resources do so with the goal to facilitate the shared prosperity and not selfish motives. As we are here today, I also invite all Ugandans to join us in Arua, Soroti, Lira, Hoima, and Kabale for the budget breakfast dialogues, where we shall further share insights and information in your regional dialogues for 2019-2020. Your rights and responsibilities to this budget is very crucial, and I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Julius Mukunda. He will also be coming back for our panel. Eribana fe aba BBS Telefaina nga tweyongera okumanya oba okutegeera ebiri mu budget. Bangi bandibadde beebuuza lwaki tubyogerako nga te budget yayita dda. Naye nga amyuka omuwandiisi ow'enkalakalira owa ministry ya finance yagambye si be balina amagezi gonna, betaaga okuweebwa amagezi, betaaga okumanya ki ekirala ekyandikoleddwa singa tuba tutegekera eggwanga mu myaka egiddako, biki ebyetaaga okuba nga bikozesebwa oba biki ebyetaaga okuba nga bikolebwa. Yayogeddeko ku bimu ku bisoomooza ng'omuli ebbula ly'emirimu, abantu nga 60,000 abayingira job market buli mwaka naye ng'ate emirimu tegiriiwo nnyo. Waliwo tweyongera okuba nga waliwo omwaganya munene eri abo abalina n'abatalina, omuzungu kye yandiise widening income inequality. Ekyo tukikozeeko tutya kuba nakyo kizibu nnyo, naye waliwo n'embeera yaffe ng'abantu aba bulijjo. Tutambudde bubi, obulamu bwaffe tetubufuddeeko nnyo. Olyanga bw'oyagala, toyagala kola exercise, toyagala kola dduyiro, ate ng'ekyo kireeseewo endwadde nnyingi ze twandibadde twewala. N'olwekyo yayogedde ku bintu ebirala bingi, tujja kuba nga tubyongera obimanya, naye ng'ate akulira Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group ye ebimu ku byayogeddeko, ayogedde ku ky'okuba nti newankubadde twongera ssente mu byobulimi, ate era nga tugamba twagala abantu abalima baleme kubeera nga balima nga afuna bufunyi akakyako okuli ewaka naye nga yeeyongera n'okutundako. Ekintu ky'okuuma bye tulimye oba bye twandiise etterekero ly'ebyo tukimanyi ng'omwaka oguwedde, omwaka guno gwennyini so oguwedde, kasooli yali mungi ng'abantu tebalina we bamutunda ate nga tebalina ne we bamutereka. Ekyo kikoleddwako kitya? Naye akasembyeyo ku bingi byayogedde, agambye gavumenti erina obusobozi okubeera nga esobola okwewola mu mawanga amalala, mu banka y'ensi yonna. Lwaki tetulekedde domestic market oba lwaki terekedde awo kubanga yeewola mu Uganda, kubanga ekyo kyekyongeddeko interest rate oba omuwendo kwe weewolera ensimbi mu bank oba mu institution endala ezigaba ensimbi. Bye bitonotono byenyiza okuba nga njogerako, and I request that we continue with our discussion. We're live on NTV, we're live on UBC, we're live on BBS Telefaina, and for continued discussion on social media, the hashtag is UGBudget19 and hashtag Know Your Budget. Our next speaker is from Uganda Revenue Authority, and I would like to call upon Mr. Chilanyang Cyprian, who is the Assistant Commissioner of Business Policy in charge of domestic taxes. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'll start by acknowledging the Minister of Finance and CSBAG for arranging this kind of function, and through this we were able to share what is happening in this year's budget. First of all, I would like to say that this year's budget actually speaks to the theme that that has been put forward, which is industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity. Probably I'll go straight away from the URA side. What is new from URA? What is coming in this year's budget? And of course, looking at the theme, one thing is sure. that at the expense of job creation, government has chosen revenue will suffer to the extent that we are going to be investing in job creation, and that of course means that there are going to be some exemptions on the side of taxes to be able to stabilize some of these industries. Straight away, I'll start with the income tax. What is okay, what is coming from the income tax? To begin with, there is a definition on beneficial owner from the Income Tax Act. Simply, what this is trying to do is to strengthen the taxation of in the international tax side. Well, the problem we've been having is we are trying to catch up with the MNEs that have established in Uganda, and so we're trying very hard to be able to define beneficial owner such that we're able to tax the international companies properly. Also, what is coming up is an exemption in the industrial parks and in the free zones for 10 years. So if you invest in an industrial park, if, for example, you set up a new one, or if you invest inside, for example, there's already an industrial park and a factory there. 10-year exemption tax if you're investing over 50 million USD, if you're a foreigner. If you're a citizen, and in this case a citizen is a Ugandan as an individual, a Ugandan company, or an East African company. If you are investing 1 million USDs in the industrial park or free zone, then there's going to be a 10-year exemption for income tax. Another one which is new is the fact that if you buy a business or a business asset, there's now a requirement that you, the person who is buying the asset, should be able to withhold 6% of the consideration and pay it to Uganda Revenue Authority. Now, this 6% that has been deducted from you is going to be a credit on your side. It's a deposit for the person who is buying the business. Also, what is new, we used to have a 1% tax on the supply of agricultural supplies. What this means is, what has been happening is when I am buying produce from farmers, for example, there was a requirement that I withhold 1% of the amount of money that I'm paying to the farmer or whoever is buying, who is selling you the agricultural product. Now, that has been repealed, and so it means that that requirement is no longer there. However, this does not exempt agriculture from income tax. Okay, so farmers or farming income, agriculture, whether animal husbandry, whether crop husbandry, there is still income tax on the profit that you make at the end of the financial year. So there will still be a requirement for you to file a return at the end of the year, and you pay the taxes accordingly. There is a new provision in the law that makes it an offense for a government official to issue a contract to somebody who doesn't, a license to somebody who does not have a TIN. We're looking at things like, for example, a trading license, simply. We're looking at even probably a practicing certificate. Wherever there's a requirement for a license to be provided by government or a regulatory body, you who has failed to give, who has given that license without the person who is receiving it having a TIN would have committed an offense. And simply this is because we realize that most of the professionals out there who are in private business have been able to avoid registering and accounting for tax. So this is one of the steps that government is taking to make sure that everybody, professionals inclusive, have been able to make their fair contribution to taxes. There's been a change on government securities. All along, when you buy treasury bills and government securities, those from BOU, you know them, the tax has been a flat 20% on the interest that you're earning, okay, only on the interest. But now the change is where the security or the bond is for more than 10 years, is going to be reduced to 10%. So of course you'll continue getting your coupon, but your monthly or 6 monthly coupon, but it will be now at 10% and not 20%. This of course is to encourage people to buy securities from the stock exchange, from Bank of Uganda. So these are the major changes that are coming from the income tax. And as you can see, they are basically revenue reducing, but most importantly, targeted at growing the economy and being able to provide industrialization and employment. From excise duty, under the excise duty, we are providing for, or actually requiring that for as long as you're producing excisable goods, you should be registered with URA. And this is also in order to help us to be able to implement the domestic tax, the digital tax stamps. Also, under the excise duty is an exemption for any excisable, for excise duty on any excisable product that you're using in the construction, development of an industry inside the industrial park. For example, there is excise duty on cement. So if you're using cement to do a construction of a factory in the industrial park, that would be exempted. The same exemption, of course, applies to VAT. If you're buying any material for construction in an industrial park, again, or a free zone, the VAT also would be exempt. For as long as, of course, the investment is $10 million for a foreigner and $1 million for a citizen. As you can see, government has chosen to encourage citizens. So for you, who is a citizen of Uganda or a company that's owned by Ugandans, for as long as you can raise $1 million, you should be able to benefit from this exemption. But for foreigners, it's 50 million USD. There is a new provision. I could say it has been there. It was there last year. but midway they stopped it to think over it again, but this year it's coming back, which is withholding tax on VAT. Last year what we had was Parliament passed a law of saying that if you're a withholding agent, you should withhold all the output tax when somebody supplies you. Let me give an example. If I am a withholding agent for VAT purposes, and you supply me, and I'm supposed to pay you 100,000 shillings, 18,000 is supposed to be VAT. What the law at that time was saying is, I pay you only 82, and I retain the 18,000, and then I pay to URA. But somehow it was found out that obviously it was affecting cash flow problems, and so it was taken back to Parliament. So now, going forward, the provision now is you withhold only 6% of the invoice value. 6% of the invoice value when you have been gazetted. So we are going to gazette a list of taxpayers who will be required to withhold. If you're not listed, the requirement to withhold is not there. But once the minister gazettes you, you're supposed to withhold that 6% for every invoice you're paying, and that 6% you pay to URA. But it's not lost, because that 6% that you have withheld, if I withheld it from you, then you actually take credit of it in the next month. So when you are filing your return for that month, you report in the return clearly that yes, this is the amount of tax I'm supposed to pay. But then so and so withheld my 6%. So I'll reduce the amount of VAT that I'm paying to URA by that figure. So it's not lost, it's just a catchment point. Another thing that is coming is that, of course, there's a note on that. If the Commissioner General is satisfied that you have been very compliant, you could actually be exempted from being withheld from. So these are some of the things that are coming with this law. There were some changes that were made in as far as the zero rating of VAT is concerned. Supply of drugs, medicines, and medical sundries manufactured in Uganda. So I think it's important for you to note that before, all drugs, medicines, and sundries were actually taxable. But what is happening now is if you import them, they would be exempt. Yes? There's a difference between being zero-rated and being exempt. So if you import them, you'll be exempt, meaning that you don't pay VAT when it's coming in the border, so you pay them you sell them at your cost price. But you cannot claim any VAT that you have incurred in the process. Now, if you are manufacturing them in Uganda, you have an advantage. The advantage is, while you don't pay VAT like the ones which are imported, you also have the possibility of claiming all the VAT that you incurred in the process of manufacturing those drugs. So it's again inward looking and really trying to encourage development of production of medicine and drugs in the country. Exemptions, I've already talked about the drugs, medicines. There are some institutions like the UN which are exempt from VAT by virtue of what they are, the nature of their establishment. Aircraft insurance services is also going to be exempt. I think you know why, obviously. Rice mills and agricultural sprayers are also going to be exempt. Imported mathematical geometry sets are also going to be exempt. Of course, for agriculture, you can understand. Have I made? Of course, you can see that rice mills and agricultural sprayers, the reason they're exempt is to encourage agriculture, so that farmers don't have to pay more for their equipment. I said imported mathematical sets and geometrical sets used in education services. They are also exempt, obviously for education. Woodworking machines, welding machines, sewing machines, these are all to encourage small-scale and cottage industry. Imported crayons, colored pencils, these are for use in schools. They are all going to be exempt. Then this exemption I've already mentioned to you, the one of VAT on anything that you're going to use for construction of a factory or warehouse in an industrial park. Under the Stamps Act, there is one major change, which is on bank guarantees. The pain that has been coming through is that when I'm applying for a job and I'm required to have a bank guarantee, when I go to the bank, the stamp duty that I pay is 1% of the value of the job. While if I went to an insurance company, that one would give me at only 50,000 shillings. I would pay stamp duty only 50,000 shillings. So there was an imbalance on the way this particular service was being provided. So the decision was to have a specific value of 100,000, which will apply irrespective whether you're getting the bond from the bank or you're getting the bond from an insurance company. Again, to develop industrial parks and free zones, there's an exemption on stamp duty where it applies if you're actually investing in an industrial park or free zone. Usually it comes, the stamp duty accrues from things like transfer of shares or registration of whatever instruments that you have. So going forward, it will be exempt if it's for these projects. Well, there was some write-off of government debt in as far as tax is concerned. And then, if you're an informer and you have given information to URA, and that informer has been, the information has been able to generate tax and actually been collected, you would get a 5%, down from 10%, which used to be there. And then, so those are the major issues that came from the policy side. As you know, revenue is collected from two different major sources. One of them are the policy sources, which are the tax laws that are provided by Parliament and the Ministry of Finance. Then the other one is from the efficiencies that URA undertakes to make sure that they achieve the target. So this year, there is what we call a domestic revenue mobilization policy, which is a 5-year plan. But as URA, we are going to do the following. We're going to expand tax capacity by digitizing. We'd like to take advantage of the digital era. First, if you're in production and you're producing excisable goods, we're going to start with excisable goods and can move to other goods as well. What we're going to do is we're going to place a device on your production line, at the end of your production line. And every product that you're producing is going to be stamped. Now, this information, of course, will be going straight away to URA. So, and we'll know how much you've produced. But most importantly, this measure is going to ensure that there is no counterfeit in the market of your product as a supplier. If, for example, you produce water, every single bottle is going to be stamped. And so, our officers will be in the field checking the products in the shelves. And so, if there is a product that is produced by that factory, or said to be produced by that factory, and it's not stamped, it would show two things. One, that probably you're producing from another factory, or that somebody is actually making a product that looks like yours. So it's an advantage to the taxpayers. It's also an advantage for revenue, because at least there's some assurance that the declarations that you make as a taxpayer are consistent with what we have in our records. This should start by 1st September for cigarettes, and then we shall roll out for products slowly by slowly. Maybe it's important to note that cigarettes right now are being stamped. The only difference is the stamps are manual, they are not digital. But now we are going to be migrating. We're starting with the cigarettes. We're going to migrate by 1st September on the digital stamp, so that we can be able to track it. E-invoices are also going to, is something that we are working on. Invoicing means that, okay, when you're issuing an invoice in your shop, that invoice bounces through the URA system. Okay, so two ways: either we'll give you a device to use so that when you're issuing your invoices, that device is the one which issues, and the information comes to URA. Or we'll give you an access to the system, so you can use even your own computer or your phone and be able to issue an invoice. So this is something that is not new in the world. I mean, we're probably the last in this part of the world to implement it, but it's because we are planning. So we should be able to roll this probably by January also. We also would like to improve e-tax. You all know the system that we've been using to collect taxes, but of course we've got feedback on some of the services. So we will be basically improving your experience in as far as e-tax is concerned, and also put more capacity, more capabilities on the system. On approach, our focus is going to be on multinationals also, especially basically international taxation. You know, it's a new field with development and so you're seeing a lot of multinationals establishing themselves in Uganda, and usually when you're dealing with multinationals, you have to guard against base erosion, okay? some companies may succeed in transferring profits from Uganda to another country, and in so doing that, they avoid paying taxes in Uganda, but pay taxes in other countries where they think the tax rate is low. So these are things that we'll be focusing on, and we are hoping that we should be able to guarantee revenue from these companies. I've already talked about tax stamps, and we'll also be doing a lot of data matching going forward. e-tax has been running since 2009. It's probably 10 years or so, and you can be sure we have a host of data, a gold mine of data. We have a lot of information from our returns and interactions, and so we'll be looking a lot at using that data. But most importantly is for the public to know that we have the capacity actually to check your transaction. So when you make a sale, never think that URA doesn't know you made that sale. So in order to make sure that people declare the right amount, so we have a capacity to match and be able to see who has declared what somebody else did not declare. We'll continue doing our rental program. You'll see us very much in the field. Our register is good in as far as rental tax is concerned, so we're going to move forward into making sure that rental income is taxed as appropriate, because it's actually a business like any other business. While for me, I open a factory, or me, I open a school, for you choose to build rental properties. So you should also make a contribution from the investment that you make. VAT, we are working on our VAT register. As you all know, probably the public needs to know that's an advantage to actually be VAT registered. There's this notion people run away from VAT registration, but in most countries which are developed, VAT registration is a plus. Because what you don't know is when you're VAT registered, then you probably not even suffer VAT. You don't. Because at the end of the day, when I sell my item, which I've produced, if I'm VAT registered, that is, I'll charge VAT. And let's say I sold at 100,000. So I'll charge VAT and I'll collect 115,000. Then I probably suffered 15,000 of VAT in buying the goods or whatever I used to make this product. Now, I have collected 18 from my customers. I suffered 15. All I do is I pay URA the difference. So for me, I'm basically scot-free. So VAT registration is a very important thing, but people don't realize it. And so we are going to be working on our register more. If we think you shouldn't be on the register, we are not going to remove you. We want to get people who are fit and proper to be on the VAT register. We are certain that this will increase the revenue coming from VAT. Also, people who are on the register, there are people we have on the register who have actually been claiming refunds. And probably this is the purpose why they're on the register. So they continue declaring refund. So we're going to be dealing with that more to remove people who are just on the register to claim refunds. And there's also it's also an offense, so you can be prosecuted if you are claiming refunds which you are not entitled. We're going to do a lot of field work. I said we have done a coalition or a collaboration with local governments. We have started with KCCA. We've been doing this for the last 3 years or so, together with URSB. And what we are actually doing is we are registering taxpayers the same time that KCCA is registering them, and the same time URSB is registering them. So this is basically to try to formalize the economy. We want to say that, look, you stop trading as mama boy, and start trading as, register your company formally and be able to pay the taxes and also the local government taxes. Great. So great. So this is what is coming. This is what is new, and in the interest of time, I'm probably going to end here. But maybe let me mention a few things at the customs side. What is coming from the customs side is there is an increase in duty, import duty, from 25 to 60% on CET for certain items. And you probably get surprised, we actually import Irish potatoes, we actually import honey, a lot of it, we import processed coffee, all those pictures you're seeing. These are things that we import. And so, in order to promote local investment, okay, we have moved the CET from 25% to 60%, so that the one which is imported becomes a little more expensive, and so it may encourage somebody who has invested locally to continue investing. So all these items you're seeing have been imported in bulk. Also the same, this one has also been increased to 35%. Those items you're seeing there, for the same reason. I don't know whether I go slowly or I hurry, but you just see the pictures, you know what they are. I can move forward. Even those, okay. Okay. So what, also for you to know, for example, tractor heads. Tractor heads are these vehicles that pull trailers. Okay, it has also been reduced to 10%. It has actually been 10%, but they have renewed it for another 1 year. Barley, all the things. At 0%, there are things that have gone to zero. And these are the ones, and I will tell you again, these are the ones we are encouraging to be done in Uganda, to be produced locally. You probably should have seen there for the mothers, there's Mama Kit, so that our mothers can give birth in a comfortable environment. Okay. So there's a lot, but in the interest of time, I've been asked to wind up my presentation. I think, of course, as you know, URA offices are available. We are online 24/7, and we shall continue with the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilanyang Cyprian, who is also going to form part of our panel. And without wasting any more time, I'm going to call upon our panelists, and it's going to be an interactive session. It's been a time for us listening through what URA has, what CSBAG has, and all the other organizations. But what are our questions? What are our suggestions? But I want to remind you as well that this dialogue, the post-budget dialogue, has been organized by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in collaboration with the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group and the Uganda Revenue Authority. And I would also request that we get ready with our questions, make sure that our questions are as brief and precise as possible to save time, because in the next few hours we should be leaving here and we will be heading to our up-country sub-regional discussions. And I would like to remind you, in Western Uganda, Western region, we are going to be in Kabale. Mid-Western, Hoima will be the district. West Nile will be represented in Arua, Lira for the Greater Northern region, and Soroti for Eastern and Karamoja regions. Now let's constitute our panel. And without wasting any more time, I would kindly request, in no particular order, to invite Dr. Adam Mugume, who is Executive Director in charge of research at the Bank of Uganda. Once again, I request that we limit our movements. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Adam Mugume, one of our panelists. I would also like to call upon Mr. Gideon Badagawa, who is the Executive Director of the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, as part of our panel as well. Let's welcome them. I do have Mr. Julius Mukunda, the Executive Director, Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, of course, to return once again. And Mr. Chilanyang Patrick from the Uganda Revenue Authority. I hope you are still here. I do request, Chilanyang Cyprian. I'm wondering what the Patrick name is doing in my mouth. And of course, I would also request to invite the Deputy Secretary, Secretary to the Treasury, Mr. Patrick Ochailap. Now I know the reason why I was thinking about a Patrick name. Let's welcome him as well, and we will fully have our panel constituted. Now, since the other speakers have actually given their overview, I will request that Dr. Adam Mugume, who is the Executive Director in charge of research at the Bank of Uganda, to give us just an overview of the budget of the financial year 2019-2020. What do you think about it? And will it work for a country like Uganda?
Thank you, moderator. I think the budget, the way you see it, I hope if I criticize, I'm not going to be sacked since the Chairap is here. Number one, I think it emphasizes things that we all know. Actually, as an economist, once you look at the budget, we think that actually we don't even need to say is the budget is the debt sustainable. Number one, you are talking about industrialization, you are talking about commercialization of agriculture, you are talking about infrastructure, you are talking about human capital development, you are talking about revenue mobilization, you are talking about natural resource exploitation, including oil and minerals. So, and then you are also talking about public investment, improvement in public investment management. I think once you combine all those, you are home and dry, because after all, you don't need to worry about debt sustainability. The challenge is obviously about implementation. So once you look at the report, etc., you think that actually everything seems to be quite excellent. But then you ask yourself, Namave has been there since when? It is only 40% complete after, is it 20 years or so? Now, if the same situation continues, then that's where we have a challenge. But actually, once we improve on public investment management, and we have identified these sectors the way they have been identified in the budget, then actually, I think even the gross estimate we are talking about of 6.3 to 7 is still below what would be generated if all these things were done. Basically, that's what I would say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mugume. And I would also request Mr. Gideon Badaga to give us an overview before we go to the questions.
I think, in my opinion, generally, the budget was good. And it speaks to the priorities of the private sector, really. I mean, even going by the theme, which is speaking to industrialization so that we create jobs. But the most important one is shared prosperity, and that speaks to inclusive growth. So if this growth is way above 6%, the question is the 68% the informal? And I recognized in the budget speech that the minister is actually admitting that there is a growing disparity in terms of income between the rural and the urban. And so the question is, are many people feeling this growth? Even we in the private sector would want to see people, you know, having the purchasing power to buy what we produce. And these are the 70% of the population that we seem to be seeing in the informal sector. So for me, the first thing is how accommodative is this budget to get everyone to participate in growth and feel it. Two, if we're talking about per capita income, and you see, the minister was very wise. He didn't tell us when we are going to achieve or attain the middle income status. Because by my calculation, if it was from 800 to 825 this year, from last year, then it would take us 16 years to get to $1,200. Now, if the fee is $9,200, 2040, that means 400 years. But the minister was very careful not to say that. And I think this figure should not have come through this budget speech because it sends people to quickly calculate and put you on spot. But three, the allocation of the budget between the tradables and non-tradables. And I want to agree, we need to pay a lot of attention to infrastructure, energy, roads, the social infrastructure, education, health, and so on and so forth. But I think if we are going to sustain our debt repayment and so on, the servicing of the debt, we need to pay a little bit more attention to areas that create wealth, that drive exports, to pay attention more to the value chains that are export-oriented, because this is where we fetch money to pay. So we can do as many dams, as many roads, and so on, and they facilitate growth. That is important, and possibly part of this 6.2% growth is because we are investing. We are spending a lot of money in infrastructure and so on, which is good. But I think gradually we need to begin to shift our attention towards agriculture. This time agriculture is 3%, because 1 trillion out of 40 trillion is about 3% or something like that. And we are stuck there year on year. That's what we're putting in agriculture. Of course, one can argue that roads is part of agriculture. Education is part of agriculture, and so on, which it is, yes, but in terms of the value chain, if you are talking about agriculture insurance, agriculture financing, the post-harvest issues, agronomy practices, all these kind of things, we want to see ourselves really paying attention to these areas. And 3 or 4, let us coordinate better. Budgets perform well when we coordinate well. Let each one of us do what they are supposed to do as an institution or as a ministry. It beats my understanding when we have problems in the national medical stores and Minister of Health spends significant amount of time constructing health centers, referral hospitals, and so on, instead of paying attention to service delivery. If drugs are not in hospitals, that is their that's what they should be doing. So that construction, whether it's schools, like for instance, Minister of Education, at times they pay a lot of attention on constructing VTIs or whatever it is, instead of looking at service delivery in these institutions. So that the mandate of construction remains with the Minister of Works. Because that is by definition, that's what they are supposed to do. So let's do what we are supposed to be doing as institutions and coordinate well and hold people to account. Hold people to account. My neighbor here is from Bank of Uganda. I don't know what, I don't want to talk about what is happening there. But there is a lot. What fails budgets to perform are institutions, if they are weakened, not well strengthened. Governance, poor governance, if systems are not working. And at the end of June, you see budgets coming back. The ministry, people are returning money because they have not been able to use this money. And the question is, did they receive this money late, or did they not plan well as to execute the activities in the due time that the budget so required them to do? So there is a lot that we need to pay attention to, of course, in addition to building capacity for human resource. Then 3 is the whole aspect about business legislations. This is part of the business environment. This budget is about supporting and improving the business environment. So laws, procedures, processes, systems, institutions, the entire governance, it's about the business environment. So if we have laws, and I've said this before, laws like the counterfeits that have never gone through, and we have been told by UNBS, nearly 70% of our products here are substandard goods. No investor would want to come in such an environment. And we are promoting East Africa as one investment destination. We need to pay attention to this. Coffee is one of our biggest exports. But the coffee bill is stuck. So we cannot watch standards, we can't enforce standards, we can't do all these kind of things. The local content. Here, the budget was trying to give us a list. They gave us a list, really trying largely to promote and support Bubu, which is a good thing. But you see, if you don't have the local content bill go through Parliament, like each one of us was excited that it would last year, we're still stuck with it. The local content bill is still stuck. Construction bill. Buildings are collapsing on people. Engineers are not reprimanded. There is something that has to be done here. All these are stuck either in Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Agriculture, like in the case of the coffee bill, and so on and so forth. So we need to pay attention to business-related legislations to support and attract investments to this country so that we can create industrialization and drive growth through job creation. I thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Gideon Badagawa. Once again, for the media, right from my extreme right, I do have Dr. Adam Mugume, who is Executive Director Research from Bank of Uganda. Mr. Gideon Badagawa is the Executive Director of a Private Sector Foundation, Uganda. I do have Mr. Julius Mukunda, who is the Executive Director of Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. Mr. Patrick Ochailap, who is the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury. And I also have Mr. Cyprian Chilanyang, who is Assistant Commissioner Business Policy, just for, I know the media loves to tag out. And I do request the technical team to work on the audio because the media is complaining, especially those who are relaying live, that on TV the audio seems to be not the best quality. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to start with you, Mr. Badagawa, still from the Private Sector Foundation. You talked about the purchasing power parity, but I do remember, I think it was the State of the Nation address. The President did say, well, we may not be in the middle income status yet, but if we were to measure Uganda's growth or economy by the purchasing power parity, he said, actually, we seem to already be in the middle income status, because he says, looking at how much a dollar can be able to buy in Uganda, it's quite a lot compared to the other regions. What do you have to say about that?
No, I think if we go by that, then literally almost every country in Africa would be moving into middle income status if we use purchasing power parity. But I think the challenge that we have, we need to look more at who is purchasing. Of course, you and I who are sitting here can purchase anything and everything that we probably need. You can do housing, you can have a vehicle, you can have your food, you can have everything, you can have your meal. But there is that more than 70% who are living on a meal a day, if they can find it. And that, to us, as a country, largely, you know, you're not going to convince anyone to say we have a good per capita income when 70% of your population are really below $1 a day. Simply because some are getting 100 million per month. And so, I mean, it's not good mathematics. So for me, I think we need to pay a lot of attention. Again, we need to focus on agriculture and organize the producer groups and link them to industry, because the industrialization that we're looking at in the budget is actually agro-led industrialization. Nothing else. Most of the industries that we have here are agro-based. If you look at Britannia, if you look at all the breweries, if you look at the Mukwano, if you look at, and these are the big industries that we have. So the question is, if they are going to provide market, are they providing market to organized producer groups? And the aspect of cooperatives then comes back. Can we organize better at the grassroots? Our people, in whatever environment they are working in, whichever sectors, could be oil seeds, could be maize, could be coffee, it could be whatever. I went to Banyankore Kweterana, I went to Nyakatonzi, and I was asking them, how much money do you need to organize yourselves? They are talking about 5 billion. Can't we mobilize 5 billion for these cooperatives to be revived so that they begin to face the market in terms of volumes, in terms of standards, and they can self-regulate and so on and so forth better? And this is where, in my opinion, growth is going to come from. If we shun away from that, it will continue to remain lip service.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Chaila, we continue to see a lot of investment in infrastructure. But the question that many Ugandans are asking, are we seeing return on investment, at least on the few infrastructural projects that we've so far invested in? That's one. Secondly, I would also like you to highlight on the aspect that Mr. Mukunda talked about, that a very small percentage of the budget actually goes to the local government, and yet this is the first point of administration.
Thank you very much, moderator, and dear viewers and listeners. Yes, there are quite a number of dividends that we are getting from infrastructure investment already. Let's look at the power sector. Substantial investments have gone in there, yes. The expansion of the people accessing the grid has gone up. The industry that you are talking about now, which is manufacturing or agro-processing, and the rural growth centers on account of the rural electrification programs, have certainly paid a lot of dividends in terms of awakening the production capacity, powering the economy for production. So that dividend alone is something that's contributing substantially to the growth of the service industry, because talk of electricity in telecoms, talk of electricity in hotels and restaurants, talk of electricity in everyday life, right from household to intermediate production, to even milling the maize, milling the rice, adding value, storing this value in supermarkets. Can you imagine a country without electricity, or if electricity went off for 2 days, how much losses would you incur in the supermarkets with things rotting away? That has been possible because of the investment in the energy sector. So if now nobody can see that, then I do not know what lenses we have. Let's go to the roads. There is substantial investment in the road sector. The number of kilometers of roads that have been upgraded from a paltry 800 and something, I saw the PS works here many years ago, to now over 6,000 roads paved and tarmacked. And this not only in one part of the country, it's across the country. How long do you then take to drive from here to Kabale? How long would you take those days to drive the same distance? How long do you take to crisscross this country using these tarmac roads? At that time in the past, sometime in the past, and now, you clearly see that as a result of the time that you save, because I said time is money, the time you save, the fuel, of course you use fuel, but the fuel you save if the roads were bad, the fuel you'd save if you are able to maneuver rather difficultly through the difficult terrain, etc., etc. there is a huge rate of return on these investments. And for some of the roads, actually, before they are constructed, a number of calculations are done to assess the internal rate of return on those investments, even from a commercial point of view, even when they are not paying any resources in terms of road user charges or whatever. It alone, on its own, because of the economic benefits, the time it takes to move goods and services for trade purposes to power the economy is actually minimized. And that's a huge cost saving to this economy, and therefore a return on that investment. Look at the investment on the infrastructure of water and sanitation. Water coverage now, as the minister announced, and the Minister of Water can bear me out, is almost 75% in urban areas and 64% in rural areas. What does it do to the economy? It helps provide the badly required resources for water for industry. It helps provide water for the households, water for institutions, water for production, water for the urban people, water for hotels. Can you imagine a hotel without water? So you can see these heavy investments certainly have given massive return to the economy. And no wonder it's no surprise that the economy is able to sustain the growth. By the way, over the last 32 years of 6.1%, we have the data. On average, of course there are some years when it came down, but on average, it has been able to sustain a growth rate of 6.1% on average over the last 32 years. And over the last 3 years, it's certainly, again, over 6%. So all these infrastructure investments certainly give us the confidence that we are doing the right thing with respect to infrastructure. I could go on and on and on, but I thought I should pick those three for a start.
The money is going to the local government.
The money is going to local governments, yes. I think, unfortunately, again, the birth rate of local governments has been faster than the birth rate of revenue. That's point number one. And what has been happening, of course, nominally, when you create a district or a local government out of the previous one, the mother gives a birth to the child, and naturally you have to share the little that you have in the household with the child, because you can't throw away the child. The moment you share, obviously, that comes down. But the truth about the matter is that in line with the Local Government Act, there is a clear formula there with respect to local government grants, which says that we should not be able to allocate in a subsequent year less resources to a local government than the ones which are going in this current financial year. So we have maintained that one because a constitutional command, we can't do much about it. But I think it's now time for us to review the decentralization policy. It's high time we reviewed it so that we clearly now set new parameters on which we should be able to proceed if we are to create new governments. And of course, talking about creation of local new governments, cities are going to be created. I think there is already a decision on that direction, but built on existing municipalities. But there is additionality of resources that's required to operationalize those cities, although in a sequenced manner. Now, the most important thing that we must pay attention to is what is the level of service delivery to this local government, in spite of the fact that the birth rate of local governments has been faster than the growth in revenues. In my view, the conditional and unconditional grants that go from the center to local governments, including salaries, by the way. When you look at now the local governments, there is a bigger part of salaries that come from the center that go to local government. That's also expenditure in local government. You see that I think my view is that we should be able to now look at the totality of what goes to local government eventually in terms of these roads, in terms of these rural electrification programs, in terms of the conditional grants that go through the normal transfers from the 5 key grants that go to, or 6 key grants that go from the center to local governments, and in terms of what goes to the payment of the local government leaders, the allowances for those levels of government. In fact, at times I argue that the most governed person in, this, in the world, because right from LC1 to later on the president, I think I have more than 150 leaders supervising me. So you see, there is that heavy aspect of money is going to these various levels. But I think for us to see the benefit of decentralization and also the resources that go to decentralized services, is better for us first to look at it holistically with respect to decentralized and other non-decentralized services, but supplied by other arms of government to the local governments. Then two, add that to the resources that actually go there. But the most important thing is that we need to think hard and firm, and perhaps see when it's appropriate for us to review. It's appropriate now, in my view, the decentralization policy as a whole, in order to reorganize. It has been there for over 20 years. We need to see how best to reorganize it afresh in light of the new creation of cities, etc. We need to look at it afresh.
All right, thank you very much. To Mr. Julius Mukunda, you talked about our debt to GDP ratio, which Ministry of Finance, of course, backed by statistics, has continuously said it's still sustainable. You also talked about the aspect of why doesn't government leave the domestic market? And yet you also said you would be fine, even if it is 100 debt to GDP ratio, as long as there is capacity to absorb. And you talked about the conditions, you're worried about the conditions attached to these loans. Doesn't that then exonerate government to continue borrowing domestically? And what suggestions do you have to debt management?
Thank you so much. I think for me on the issue of debt management is that I don't know if you have seen a post by our president, the president from Tanzania, the kind of condition he was talking about on the loans that they have. But also we know very well that the Auditor General talked about this in his report last year, whereby that some of the conditions actually are so stringent to the extent that they might incapacitate you to pay back some of these loans. So, but what we have also realized is that this is the industry practice. If somebody is going to give you money, they need a guarantee that actually you pay back, and that if you are likely not to pay back, then they take over whatever they have given you. So for governments, I think like Uganda, what we need to do is to be extremely careful. First, our level of appetite for these loans must be directed to where we can get the best returns. That's number one. I think that for me that's the very key and very important. Number two is that I think we need to fix leakages, but also improve our capacity to deliver on what we have borrowed for. And I think the PSTST talked about, the Ministry of Water as one of the bishops we have. They start a project and they're able to finish it on time and within the budget. So what is preventing other sectors from doing the same? Why don't we deal with that to ensure that they can be able to do that? And I think that's something that the ministry should be able to do. The other important, I think, for me on the domestic market, again, is that you realize that in the most cases, getting money from the domestic market is the easiest. When they go to Mr. Mugume and they say, please raise for us $1 trillion, he's likely to raise it probably in a week or two, and money is in the market. But if you have to negotiate a loan from World Bank, I'm told it doesn't take you more than a year. It might take you more than a year to actually get that particular loan. But it means we need to plan. You just can't get a loan tomorrow. You need to plan for it. If we know we're going to raise more money in the budget, why don't we plan now to raise that particular money? So government has the capacity to get more money abroad and leave the domestic market for the suppliers. But also I think there is something I would like to retaliate on what the Permanent Secretary has said about local governments, funding local governments. I think I'm glad that we can begin to start this conversation on how much we should give local governments and what they are supposed to be doing. Yes, I know we cannot say we should deauthorize security. That would be disaster. I know we cannot decentralize foreign affairs department. I mean, it will be very difficult. But we know that if you are implementing a project in 10 districts and that project is being managed here in Kampala, that is wrong. That project should go to the districts where it's supposed to be implemented. As simple as that. I think if we come back to those kind of conversations, districts will have enough resources to deliver on their mandate and stop all these bureaucracies. I'm looking forward for that discussion. And lastly, I think for me is, I think also this kind of conversation I think is good, because 5 years ago we could not have these discussions. Why? Simply because I think it has come to realization that we need all to understand our challenges as a country and debate them and look for solutions. And I'm glad the Parliament Secretary said that they are not they're not the ones with the ideas. They can also tap on other ideas like what we are doing today. So I think also that's a plus for me on part of ministry to open up, and we look forward for other ministries also to open up these kind of debates. And we talk about agriculture, health, and everything else. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. To Mr. Chilanyang. Oh, okay.
Something I didn't want my neighbor to go away with. When he mentioned that at a split of a second I can tell Mugume to borrow and he borrows. No, we're doing a lot of planning. I hope you have seen from the budget that I think there is 2.1 trillion already programmed and Parliament must approve. And there is a law which governs the way we go to the central bank. Surely we cannot go to the central bank without going through Parliament for fiscal purposes. So I thought I should alert everybody that we are not ad hoc in going to the central bank. We planned for this, and it's also appropriated by Parliament, by law, before we go to central bank. It's planned, sent to Parliament, Parliament approves, then we go and live within that. In a likely event that we want more, we still go through the same process. So it's not very simple that I pick a phone and then Adam prints or sells. It can't be the case. I thought I should put it out on record. Thank you.
All right, but maybe the truth in there was that it's easier for you to get money from Bank of Uganda than the World Bank. All right, to Mr. Chilanyang, whenever we talk about revenue collection, everyone's discussion goes to one, the tax base being small or not growing or stagnating, and also the informal sector. What are you expected to do as you are different from what you did in this ending financial year for the next financial year to ensure that the informal sector comes on board? Because I know that there are a number of people who are making money in the informal sector. They should have been paying taxes, but they're not.
Thank you very much. First of all, I was hoping that the PSST would appreciate URA because it's mentioned national water as the most efficient, and I was hoping that in the same breath it would say URA has done very well, because as we speak we are probably having over 300 billion surplus, and this could increase at the end of the... Okay. So what is URA doing? Simply, one thing is for sure, this year is a bit going to be tough for us. Like I mentioned, we are having less revenue generating policies coming this year. And so much of the work that is going to come through is going to be URA using the existing provisions and its structure to be able to collect more revenue. Now, a couple of things. I already talked about taking advantage of the digital world. So what is going to happen is, when, for example, you have issued an invoice, we already have information. So two things happen. We know who you're selling to, okay? And so if such a person is not registered with URA, and those are the people we are calling informal right now, we should be able to catch that person. Two, when you're claiming an expense from somebody who actually is not registered with URA, then we should be able to catch those people using the digital handle. Another thing that we are going to be doing much, and we've actually been doing it a lot, is the tax education. well, I'm sure you've seen us all over the place. You've seen us on TV, you've seen us on radio. We're going to continue doing this. So we're going to be around trying to educate people and so hopefully they can comply. The problem sometimes is, of course, people say they don't know. And true, really, there are some people who do not know some of these obligations. So this is what we're going to be doing more going forward. Then importantly is the issue of field work. Okay, we're going to be moving through town. Already you probably have seen us. We'll be moving a lot and try to remind people to pay their taxes going forward.
All right, thank you very much. Now it's time for the audience as well to be part. And I do request for 2 volunteers, either from Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, CSBAG or URA, to get the 2 microphones from the technical team and move them around. I request that you are as brief and precise as possible and direct your question to the person you want to answer it. So I don't want to call on names, but I request for 2 volunteers. I already have one. And all right, we have a hand already here. All right, the microphones will be moving. I'll request that one stays around that side and the other comes this side.
I also wanted for record to let the audience know that I have here a technical team, of course, to answer the simpler questions, I answer the tough ones. I have the Director Budget, Mr. Kenneth Mugambe, with his technical team within the House. Can you please raise your hand? I have the person standing for Accountant General, Mr. Godfrey Semgoma, with our technical team. I have the Director Debt and Cash Policy, or her representative, to answer all debt issues. Can you put up the hand? Yeah, or somewhere right there, yes. Zerida Sigiti. I have the people from the internal audit to answer issues about counting officers who don't count and what he has found out. So I think that's basically the team which is backing up my panel today. Thank you.
All right, so he will be directing some of those questions to the technical team. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator. Protocol observed. Good morning. My name is Bonnie Kagawa. I teach at Makerere University Business School. My question is to Mr. Patrick, Minister of Finance. And basically I'm going to have 2 points. One is on debt management or debt sustainability, and then agriculture. Borrowing is not bad, Mr. Patrick, but we are borrowing for what? Industrialization. Industrializing what? Agro-led industries, like Soroti Fruit Factory, which has no capacity of raw materials to produce sustainably every day for the 120,000 liters of juice. What has happened? Actually, if I have the chance to meet the president, I'm going to tell him, Mr. President, we have 2 challenges. One, we are going to continuously produce under capacity or import raw materials of fruits, because we failed to organize people in the Teso sub-region to grow fruits. If the youth in Teso sub-region and the East, you're talking about agriculture, commercialization of agriculture, then what's the space of our Ministry of Finance and Agriculture to make sure young people are growing for feeding these industries? Otherwise, we shall continue to have these industrial parks with hungry raw materials for them. Next is on debt financing, and then also, Mr. Gideon, I would pick your point on this. 10 trillion going back to pay the interest rates. Well, it sounds good, but my word on the debt is not even actually the debt itself, but borrowing internally. We are going to curtail the private sector ideally. So if we can, I concur with Mr. Mukunda, if we continue to borrow externally, we have no problem, and we leave the money for these entrepreneurs to borrow, because we shall continue to see double digits interest rates with a lot of commercial banks in Uganda. I just get beaten up by such a thing. Otherwise, I think also to move forward, these are my recommendations, Mildred. One, if we can have improvement in public investment management, You see, that's very good. And accountability. Then we improve and organize the business environment. That one also be good. And then also prepare for oil, because I see 3 trillion to the Ministry of Energy. So those things I think they are going to help us. And then lastly is the challenges in the global world. Uganda is an open economy. And don't shy away to talk about things like, geopolitics, Brexit and US politics. We need to also give attention to that, the regional kind of things that you're seeing today. And then also the slow growth in Chinese economy and the war they are having with the US. Those are also things that externally affect us. And I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be moving on to the next person who could be relatively more brief than that. The microphone this side, we do have, I have no particular, there is a gentleman right behind in front of you.
Thank you very much, moderator. And the panel, we appreciate their thoughts on the various issues. My name is Nsereko Mike from NEMA. Moderator, you realize that when the Minister of Finance was reading the budget, he was very, very passionate about environment. And that is right, because as you know, environment underpins growth and almost everything we do, like in an economy like Uganda's. You will note that environment underpins the issue of energy, because without water, you will not have hydropower electricity. Environment underpins agriculture, because agriculture needs water. Environment underpins a lot of things, because we are a natural resource-based economy. But you realize that out of the 1.1 trillion budget for the water and environment sector, the environment has less than 20 billion in that budget. And I want to direct this question to the Ministry of Finance. How do you expect a 20 billion budget to support the total budget of 40.48 trillion shillings? I think that as a country, we have not prioritized the environment, and as such, like the PSST was saying, we are noting environmental disasters from floods to diseases to landslides and so on and so forth. So I think the Minister of Finance must prioritize the area of environment. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you too. We'll use the other microphone, the other side, the gentleman right behind. And then we had a lady on the table here to ask the
Thank you,
question.
moderator. My name is Moses Ogwal from Private Sector Foundation. We recently discussed this, and there are a few things which the private sector had asked us to present here. The quick one is, we note government wrote off taxes, possibly because they had difficulty to pay those taxes. We just want to bring to our attention, everybody, that possibly very small scale people have difficulties more than government. Particularly when you look at the SMEs who were brought, we tried to bring them into the bracket, and they were asked to register and were not able to do accountability, where URA goes and estimates. That category of SMEs are going under. So if government can see that they have difficulty, we think you should consider these very small SMEs for a write-off. The second issue is, we recognize the element of infrastructure, what it brings, and you elaborated very well the advantages, particularly reduction of costs towards the private sector. Why could you not consider some cost reduction from government? If you are moving from Kisoro to, I don't know which top place, nicely, would you need a four-wheel? Will you activate a four-wheel if you are driving? Why spend 4,500 cc four-wheel vehicles? Why don't you reduce the expenditure from that side arising from the investment which you have made in infrastructure? The other issue which we are asking about, the tax, the issue of withholding tax VAT is not because the problem is mainly on cash flow. The challenge is there's unlevel play field. When I'm purchasing from somebody who is not registered, when I'm purchasing and I'm registered, I have to withhold 6%, which you have said you have reduced. But the other person I'm competing with does not withhold at all. So wherever you are going to purchase the service, you will be 6% more expensive. That is the point which we request you to appreciate.
Okay.
So in the market, it is very, very challenging.
And I do request
the last one, as I said, there was a list of private who are not here.
Okay.
Allow me. The other one is the comfort would want. If you see the tax revenue which we are supposed to graze domestically, it looks like it is going to increase by about 20% or 24%. If you compare it with last year. The issue is, if the economy is not going to grow at that level, where are you going to get these resources? Should we be worried that you are going to come on, descend onto the private sector so badly? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses. I do have a lady on this side, and we'll take 2 more extra questions before we go to the answers.
Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Omnisha Blessing Immaculate. I'm the head policy for Uganda National Chamber of Commerce. I just have 2.5 questions. The first one goes to Ministry of Finance. We are also to tax maybe, because they have imposed importation taxes on goods that are already produced in the country. But what is the plan on the quality of the goods that are being produced, on the cost of production, and on the number of goods that are being produced? Because Ugandans are not able to even produce what the consumers want. The quality, the quantity, the cost of production still makes the goods very expensive for the Ugandan market to actually consume. And even if we are to export those goods, do they meet the standards that we want outside there? Because when we export the goods, we will not be able to compete with the international market. So what's the implementation plan on that? And then secondly, about the farmers, I have had so many instances where they're saying commercialization of the agriculture sector, but the government is actually setting up its own farms and not considering the farmers in the root market. So if the farmers are already producing the exact goods that the government is setting up farms to actually produce, have you considered, we are looking at inclusional development, have you considered the farmers out there, and how are you going to connect the farmers to the agricultural industrialization policy? Then the last one goes to the tax URA. You have exonerated the government, you've waived off all their taxes, and you should have considered that the government is a major contributor to our tax system. So if we expected to hit a particular target and you've decided to waive off the taxes that the major contributor could have brought in, how are you going to hit the target, and how have you considered the other people who are actually struggling with the taxes? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Blessing. We'll take a question from that side. Do we have a hand? We don't. We had a hand right here. The gentleman.
Yeah, thank you, the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bonnie Philip. I'm from the Teachers Union. I'm not going to talk about the teachers right now because I know we task you to give our money. We're waiting for that. Thank you. However, my concern is about the quality of life. My colleague from the private sector made some pertinent points, and really, if we are to go by what he said, that is going to be the way to good quality of life. The concern is about the quality of goods we have in the market. Real matters, we promote the local content, but if we are not mindful of the quality of the goods, everywhere you go, it is fake food, fake roads, fake medicine, fake everything. Where are we going? You see the rate of people dying, the ailments we are getting right now. It is because we are not paying attention to some of these substandard goods that we have in the market. And really, it is a serious concern. And I'm not happy that it has not come out clearly. So I want to task the ministry to ensure that they put some deliberate effort to ensure that we improve on the quality of the goods so that we have quality human resource could be able to develop this country. Thank you.
All right, and we'll hold the questions for now kindly to allow that the few be answered. Then we'll have a second round, which will be a very last one. When Mr. Boni was talking about fake, I almost asked we are fake teachers as well. I don't know. I am not very sure. But I think the most questions, let's start off with Ministry of Finance. Are you handing over any of the questions to the technical team and the few you answered?
Yes, I deal with one or two. The debt issue, the 10 trillion borrowing internally, etc. I think I did mention that in our contracting of debt, we deliberately do not contract a larger part of debt domestically. If you look at the debt numbers and composition, you'll find that the largest part is from multilateral donor development partners, the World Bank, ADB, etc., for those large projects. And then the other part is small commercial part of the loan. I'll request that we should be able to share our debt bulletin, which is part of what has been submitted by the Minister to Parliament, so that we can widely share that, even with the exchange of emails, so that you see clearly that the domestic debt is just about less than 30% of the overall debt portfolio that we have in budget, financing our budget. So that means that we are paying more attention for the need not to distort the domestic debt position by government over-relying on domestic borrowing to finance its fiscal deficit. And even then, as I said, we really follow the entire cycle of borrowing. The fair news is that the interest rates, of course, are still high. That's a fact. But the fair news is, which is emerging, and Adam can confirm this, is that the private sector uptake of credit has substantially grown, which means partly they are responding to the limited participation of government in order not to hike the interest rates by borrowing heavily from the domestic market, and also responding to other government policies with respect to how to grow their businesses. And by growing their businesses, they grow the economy. So that's the part of the equation that we need to pay attention to. But we take note and the warnings from everybody that debt, if not well managed, can really be a disaster for this economy. And we pay attention to that religiously. The second point I want to respond overall is with respect to the issue raised by the gentleman, the lecturer, I think, from this side. The issue about like Sorority Fruit Factory has been commissioned, there is no raw material, etc., etc. That factory was commissioned, I think, sometime around even the dry season of the Teso region. And it was a better time to commission it because it would send a signal that, yes, you can see the vagaries of weather. The weather is dry. What do we need to do in order to sustain productivity of oranges? Not only in Teso sub-region, that's a catchment area. In fact, it should be viewed as a factory for all the fruits, not only from Teso, but from everywhere there. Now, you now need to do with what we have done with respect to allocation of resources to the water and environment sector. Solar watered pumps. Of course, the number of, what the constraint there is, how do you cooperate with fragmented land tenure systems to water crops for everybody? I have 50 oranges here, 200 there, the other side, and etc. Two ways are being done, again in line with the strategy. One, using demonstration farms. There's Odina, there are quite a number of them in that sub-region. We introduced pilots on solar-powered water pumps. Why solar-powered? Because when it's dry season, the problem is sun, killing the crops. So turn around that disadvantage of the sun into an advantage of the energy for the pumping water from where? Underground. These people of environment who are complaining about money know where water is in those areas. Organize people around production areas Somebody mentioned cooperatives. That's the direction to go. Groups, farmer groups, organize them around a nucleus farmer to be outgrowers. Then install solar water pumps. The pilots have been very good in the same area. So scale them up and pump water using solar power, turn it around to water the oranges so that you have all year production of oranges. It's not an overnight issue, but something that could be taken. And for next financial year, I think there's a budget of, they wanted 35 billion for a start, but I think we've given them 10 for a start. We shall see how the 10 is going to be applied. And good enough now the oranges are going to come. But we should not be, I agree with you, we should not be doing a stop-go for these industries. Otherwise, we shall be not using resources efficiently in terms of these industries. But that's really a game changer in the sub-region. You can imagine 10 billion shillings now going to the region, besides the local government transfers. It is now going to the farmers themselves. So it's a very good incentive for them to cooperate. But we need to link it with the environment so that we don't have oranges between, they're about to come now, between August to December, January, then from January to almost end of April, there's no oranges. That's not how we should go. To mitigate that, do the solar power irrigation schemes. The issue about NEMA, I'll ask the Director of Budget to answer that, but what I know is that your sector did think through the allocations very well. I hope the 1.1 trillion is not largely for salaries. Otherwise, that would be a misallocation of resources. But Director of Budget can answer. I don't know what the 20 billion is meant to do there, but I think Director of Budget will be able to answer about the allocative efficiency there. I leave the issues about taxes to my revenue guru, but my friend from private sector, that you're worried that government will raid the private sector to get the 20 trillion. Absolutely not. As Mr. Chilanang said, the policy this year, next financial year, is not to increase taxes. It's to leverage the advantage of technology. Now that we have invested in this fiber optic, we have invested in power, the power doesn't go off, to do quite a number of things. Cargo tracking, he didn't mention that. Point of sale machines, for example, if they installed in capital shoppers here, and also go to Sorority, there's a supermarket there, and also these places where supermarkets. Because when you go there, they swipe, toot, toot, the thing goes. That's money, and there is VAT, there's excise duty, there's what, in those things that are being swiped. You pay how much? 200,000, you walk off. At the end of the reporting period, this supermarket will report that, me, URA, I collected only these taxes, you have them. But when they install the devices that are going to install those big supermarkets, the outlet, point of sales, I think you're going to get 1,000 next financial year. As soon as that passes through a machine, for that shop, they know how much they have sold and how much taxes actually they are supposed to collect. And real time, URA knows from their collection point that this supermarket today, or at this point of sale machine, has collected VAT of this, excise duty of this, and whatever of this. Finished. By the time you report at the end of the reporting period that you have collected this, it should be at par. We believe that alone will leverage what I suspect, you suspect, has not been collected. Using technology, no tax increases. The third, which he didn't mention, is, I think he mentioned it. We respect, again, working with you with manufacturers. That's why there was a bit of resistance to install digital stamps in this, starting with accessible commodities thing, the water, the beers, the etc. for local manufacturers here. So that at the production end of the production line, the manufacturer knows how many bottles he has manufactured truly of beer, how much tax is supposed to be remitted to URA, and URA at real time will know how much tax has been manufactured by that factory. What's happening now and this year? Of course, they file returns at the end of the period. They say, this year, electricity went off, and your tax this year, this period is this one. But this time, when he says it's that, URA it simplifies the quarrels that you have with URA. I just go and say, you said you manufactured this. These are the digital sums I issued to you. Bring. Your guess is as good as mine. What revenue you are going to get from that?
Okay.
Using technology, but not increasing taxes. I can go on and on and on, but I think let me leave that at this point in time, or else I hope you'll not stop me from coming to your factory to install these things. I think let me leave the rest of the questions to this person,
yes,
for revenue, and then maybe Director Budget will touch on the allocative efficiency of some of these areas.
Maybe before we go to Mr. Chilanyang, we'll go to the Director Budget, Mr. Mugambi.
Okay, thank you very much. I think my understanding of the question was a concern that the funding for the environment is not sufficient. Okay, and I thought I would actually put the environment in the proper perspective. There are two key aspects of the environment when we prepare a budget. So you have, on the one hand, policy, regulation, and enforcement, okay, which is actually the work done by the Ministry of Environment and NEMA, etc. And then, of course, you have financing for the mitigation measures, okay, replanting of forests, water for production, etc. So I think I definitely agree, first of all, that we need more resources, okay? We need more resources in environment. But the question is, what are these resources actually, especially when we are talking about policy, regulation, doing, okay? If you look at the totality of the resources for policy and regulation, it's about 150 billion. So it's not actually entirely, low. So it's about 150 billion. Now the question one would ask is, if you're talking of an institution like NEMA, No, I'm just speaking on NEMA. NEMA seems to be jittery already. No, I want to talk about NEMA. In our language, they have a saying that when you talk about bonds, old bonds, then some people start getting jittery. So the question I'm saying, okay, so we know the role of NEMA. Let's pick on NEMA as an example, okay? NEMA, in terms of, if you talk about the private sector and industries in particular, they are expected, of course, before you set up an industry, say in the park or whatever, they do an EIA and then they register. They definitely need money for that. But in my opinion, that's not huge sums of money. So the question is, do these institutions of government actually play their rightful role, okay, in enforcing these measures which have been put in place, in ensuring that the law is implemented? Look at, what goes on actually in most of the industrial parks now. Look at the Mbarara area, Mukono Mbarara area. That area, I'm sure for all those of you who pass Ginger Road, never used to flood. Of recent, it has actually flooded. It started flooding. If you pass there when the rains have come, you'll actually be shocked. And the reason why they are flooding is why? Because, of course, a lot of industries have come up, and actually the industries have been built in the wetlands. So the question I'm asking is, which I want to ask my friends in NEMA, which actually is now for us as government, how much resources do you actually need? Because in most cases, we are quick, okay, to point at limitations of resources. But the question is, how much resources do you actually need to carry out some of those, to enforce actually? Of course, working with other institutions of government. So before we jump on the resource limitations, I think there's a lot actually that we can actually do as government now, okay, within the limited resources we have. If we are efficient as government, if NEMA does its role, police does its role, work with the manufacturers, then of course we are able actually to address some of these challenges which are rising. And I can guarantee you, just like the example DST was giving of the flooding at Sherub Gorobi, which we all actually shared, on social media, there are some interventions we can actually undertake within the limited resources. But anyway, just specifically to highlight, NEMA as an institution itself actually has had some slight increase in its allocations. And as I said, of course, the funding for policy and regulation across the environment sector is about 150 billion, which is actually, to some extent, in my opinion, can actually do something. Now, if you look at the other part of environment, which is the replanting of the forest, the afforestation, the water for production, the irrigation, we have in the budget of 1920 provided almost 500 billion Okay? Now, all those two should actually be complementary interventions that should see us have the effect. Now, if you recall what the minister presented, the minister did mention in his speech that we need climate-smart interventions. Okay, so what we have done in the budget of 1920 is an attempt to move towards those climate-smart interventions. Now, I also want to comment just briefly on the I think Uma raised the efficiency question. Now, in the budget of 1920, of course, we agree there's a lot we can actually do to improve the efficiency of the budget. But at least for the budget of the coming financial year, government has made a deliberate decision to stop purchase of vehicles. We are going to save 100 billion shillings by actually implementing this decision alone. 100 billion shillings. And this 100 billion shillings actually has partially gone towards payment of salaries for the teachers and also provision of water for production. So yes, definitely there is a lot we can do, but I think we should also be able to appreciate some of the interventions that we are doing as government to ensure that there is increased efficiency of the budget. Thank you. I think I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chilanyang.
Okay, thank you. There are two issues for URA. The first one is slightly for the Minister of Finance, but the issue of government waiving areas, tax areas. But maybe to understand, yes, one of the biggest taxpayers of URA is actually government. That is also true. But then there are two ways. One of them is normal flows every month or every year. The other one is areas. So, well, it's true, once you waive areas, there's definitely going to have some problem on the revenue that's been coming from the government. What you probably need to understand is why is this happening? And that's a big question. The truth is, government committed to pay this tax. It's their obligation. But then Parliament did not provide them money to pay for these taxes. So this was a catch-22 position. So I think the best way to deal with it was to waive it. So the auditors were looking at it in the books of account. Parliament was not giving money for them to pay, so they had to be written off. So sometimes you look at it. But after all, anyway, tax, if government is paying taxes, it's still going to collect it from the taxpayers. So so the issue of saying that because government has waived their taxes, SMEs should also be waived, I think it's not acceptable. I think then who will pay taxes? Unless we are prepared to pay taxes as individuals, because it's actually the businesses that should be paying or contributing the most of the taxes and not the individual people. The second question is on withholding VAT. And the question is the question of unleveled ground. My answer to that is this. So when this policy was being made, the beer manufacturing should also be made an agent. If you're making somebody who is a manufacturer of, let's say, what's a good example of water, you're making somebody who's a manufacturer of water, withholding agent, it means that you need to get everybody who is manufacturing water in the economy to also become an agent. That way, the effect of one competing, having an advantage over the other, goes away. So we are actually coming up with guidelines. As you know, this is going to be effective 1st July. So guidelines are soon coming out, and everybody in those industries will be listed. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Badagao looked very, I don't know which statement to use, especially when Mr. Chilanyang was talking about government waivers. Do you want to make a rebuttal to that?
No, look. To fund a budget is from your own resources as a country. It's not from debt. And this is a budget of 40 trillion. We are mobilizing 20, half of it, in domestic revenues, tax and non-tax. Now, until we have the discipline to pay taxes, individuals, businesses, government, everyone by the tax law, if we respect the tax law, we will not have a problem. But if we set a precedence that the government can run away with it, And padlocks can be put on the enterprises, the companies, if they don't meet their tax obligations and so on. I think we are sending a wrong signal in this country. And especially for SMEs. SMEs are very good at running away. And we don't want to see much cost in enforcement, because that cost is part of the taxpayers' money. So if we can invite compliance, if government can play as a good example, by meeting their tax obligation. And I think this was a big debate. That reason that has been given by URA, that money was not appropriated by Parliament for government to pay, I think to me doesn't stand. Because someone saw this coming. Did anyone plan to pay the taxes? Because you're employing people and you are deducting their pay as you earn. Remit it to URA. Why should it remain outstanding for 2, 3 years, 4 years, and so on, and then you build the areas? Because at any rate, like he said, it's taxpayers' money. So you appropriate this money, you plan for it, so pay it up. The issue is, let us have compliance from government, from the private sector. Only then can we sustain funding for this budget. But two, I thought I should, maybe since I still have the floor, I thought I should talk about the issue of the taxes that were raised to support local production, which was a very good thing. But the challenge that we have, when you look at this budget, 6 trillion is going into works, roads, 6 trillion. And you're talking about steel, you're talking about cement. These are not part of this list. And at the end of the day, you'll have the dams constructed, you have the roads constructed, you have all these things. But the thing is, money is going out of this country. I think this budget should have been responsible to the citizens of this country and say, look, since we have provided this, rather than Irish potatoes and onions and I don't know what, by the way, even Irish potatoes, if we do not pay attention to standards, KFC still will import Irish potatoes. They will import them. If we don't pay attention to standards, if UNBS continues to complain about equipment, laboratories, is it staffing and so on, like they have been, all this list, if we are not careful, we are not going to get anything out of it. But my major emphasis is on steel and cement. Can we provide it as part of that list that was announced? Because it's not there. And yet 80% of the budget is going into energy, dams and so on. It's going into roads, transport and so on. So I thought maybe we could come back to that at some point.
Okay.
Patrick, thank you.
All right, and we will definitely have the panelists wrap up, and I know they have a few pointers they will be looking at, but we want to take on a few more questions for our last session, and we do have this side. I do have 3 from this side. I do have the Idinema. I do have a gentleman at the back and the lady right here. From the side.
Thank you very much, moderator. I just want to mention a few things. What are the risk factors to this budget that you factored in, that if, apart from what has been talked, and it's very important that these are outlined and they are fundamental. I would think what the minister outlined, although without defending some of those. Secondly, I wanted to know, I listened to the minister talk and read all this budget, but I didn't see any alignment of this budget to the National Development Plan. There was no mention at all in the speech. So I don't know whether the NDP informed the budget, or if it is informed, it's assumed that it informed it clearly. Lastly, the issues that are raised about the road infrastructure, oil and development as areas that have received funding. It's good they have received funding. However, it will dovetail to what my colleague, the Director of Budget, was saying, to ensure that all those are done according to the requirements of Uganda for sustainability. There is need to invest in this base structure that we are talking about. So I think what we are right now, for the last 2 days also, we're in Hoima, trying to ensure that the investment that's going to take place for oil and gas the pipeline, the refinery and all the things where they're going to drill the oil, that they're going to drill that oil, get it to the market without interfering with the people that are there. That's the environment we're talking about. We're not talking about flooding, wetlands, whatever. We're talking about high value. And that's why we're talking that we should plan so that the Ugandans benefit. The only benefit from oil and gas Ugandans is to ensure that where they live remains, it remains like that and they're able to make their living. I know the government is efficient in getting money, whatever, they will receive it, but for them, ensuring that the environment where they live, the land where they live, does not get contaminated with oil. That's where our preoccupation is, and that's what we're talking about, allocating money and minimizing risks to the investment.
All right, thank you very much. There is a gentleman at the extreme end with specs, please.
Thank you very much. I'm the gentleman with the specs.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm Colonel Ronald Rubare, Operation Wealth Creation, sitting at Ministry of Finance for the last 5 years. Now, this question goes to Dr. Adam and the first three. The point is the statistics, how you calculate the per capita. I know they're international, but as far as Uganda is concerned, are we on the right track? I'll give an illustration. All of us know, of course, what Ultamagozi was always on the radio, on TV, yelling about Nakaseke. But last week, our general called us into Nakaseke, his top technical people where I belong. And we interrogated the technical people of Nakaseke district. One statistic came out very clear. The statistic from UBOS of 2014 was that Nakaseke has income per capita of $112 US, which comparable to 820 something is kind of a big gap. So by interrogating that, the question comes, if we empowered UBOS to give us the real statistics at the right time, real time, at least within 1 year gap, I'm sure the people here will be able to push us into the middle income status within 1 year or 2 years. We believe that. Now, what have we done as Operation Wealth Creation? We'd like to thank you for supporting us, and we are here to stay in the phase 2, which is agro-industrialization. Exactly, that is the topic here. Now, what has our General Sale done? He has asked us to go with our boots tied into Nakaseke, Chikandwa, and that area, and do a catch-up. We bring those people up, and we think within 1 year and a half, we might be near 500 USD. We need support from our director, PSST, to ensure that we get the resources required. URA, I hope you not overtax that, so that we bring those people up to scale, and then we shall not take 400 years, sir. I'm sure by 2021, if we do that on every district, we shall reach our middle income status. It is the people we are targeting.
Thank you, Mr. Rubare. And there is a lady right in front of the same last table. There is a lady there. And then we will also be using the microphone, the other microphone this side, to get 3 questions as well. You can move the other microphone the other side. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Grace Namugambe. I work with Siatini, Uganda. My questions go to Ministry of Finance and URA about the incentives that are being awarded to investors, those who are foreign and those who are citizens. Last year, the same amendment was included, and for foreigners to actually benefit, you had to invest about $15 million US. And for for the citizens, it was about 10 million, it was about $5 million US. So I'm wondering why Ministry of Finance is still going ahead this year to reduce that capital requirement now to 10 million, and 5 million and 1 million respectively. 10 and 1 million respectively. And while we define citizens to include members of the partner states, are we ready as Ugandans to compete in terms of the capital requirements with members of the other East African community? And also, are other countries within the ESC providing the same incentives? Because if that doesn't happen, then as a country, we are bound to lose. The other issue was about issuing of licenses, where regulatory bodies and local governments and the professional bodies are required to actually issue licenses to only those who have teens. Going forward, if everyone, say, gets a teen and presents it to get a license, that is okay. When they're applying for a renewal of a license, will it still be a requirement to just present a teen, or can we go forward and ask for maybe a tax clearance certificate to show that much as I actually presented a teen, I've been filing my returns and paying taxes, rather than just having a growing register without people being compliant?
All right.
Sorry, this is the last one. On the 500 billion tax waiver, that we noted that in 2017, Parliament actually rejected some of these waivers because the documents presented were not authentic. And then this year, we still see the same people asking now for the taxes to be waived. Is there a way as a country we could have a clear policy that actually guides the award of some of these incentives so that it's more transparent and does not discourage taxpayers at the end of the day?
All right, thank you very much, Grace. I will take just 3 questions from the other side. I do have a gentleman right there and one here. And then the lady who was right behind the camera, since we don't have so many questions from the other side. There's a gentleman right behind there. Yes. Let's make it brief.
Ladies and gentlemen in this room, and those who are watching us on TV and listening us on radio. I'm a teacher by profession and a trained soldier. Also, I retired.
Your name, please, and we go to the
question is, you are talking of tax compliance, but those whom you collect tax from, they ask, what is the value of that tax? The roads are around, we are moving in mud, but we are enjoying money in these first-class hotels. So we should look at a way of, people don't know the value of tax. They don't know why they are paying the tax. So you should utilize the media and the teachers. I thank the president. He was talking of valuing the teachers in this country. We can't have a better country. It is the teachers too. We are all here talking this English because of the teachers. Even the president himself, I thank him, he's a good speaker. Speaks because teachers taught him. So I thank everybody for this.
Thank you very much. Though we didn't get to know your name, please. There is a gentleman right here and the lady right behind the camera. There's a lady right behind the camera and the gentleman in white.
Thank you. I'm Navasa Wilson, Alex, NRM Youth Diehard Chairperson.
Let's get straight to the question, please.
About agriculture, really this allocation is still small. And when you talk that it was increased, that the 2 trillion increase is very small, and I think you should look onto that even in the future. Secondly, let me give also highlight on that. I read the report by Economic Policy Research Center. Good thing Dr. Sarah Sewanyana is here. About how appropriate is the single spine structure, and it was Uganda's agricultural extension system has experienced several changes since colonial times, despite well-intended interventions in extension reforms. A large number of smallholder farms and other valuable groups remain unreached by the various public extension system, and the private sector plays only a limited role. Yeah, with that, I think we should think more about agriculture.
Right.
And lastly, we have Dr. Adam Mugume here. I think he should give us a small hint about money printing, given the fact that we have the increasing debt, if that money even can be used to reduce on our debt.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you. I will go with the lady last, and we wind up.
Thank you so much, and the panelists, thank you for the presentation. I'm called Gloria Achayo, and I work with Food Rights Alliance. For us, food is first, and when he's talking about agriculture, it's issue of concern to all of us. You're talking about industrialization and job creation. We all do know that all this has to go on land. Industrialization is going to need land. Access road is going to need land for the construction of the industries themselves. And also, to support the industry, you're going to need land for outgrowers and all that. But experience in land acquisition in Uganda has showed us a lot. There's been complaint of compensation and all that. Even when in the Albertine region, we are all seeing these issues coming up. But to my surprise, we have seen reduction in the budget allocation in land sector. How do we expect the land sector perform to its fullest when we are talking of industrialization? And the same question will go to agriculture sector. Then the other issue is when the gentleman from Mr. Patrick from Ministry of Finance was emphasizing electricity, how it's supporting the supermarkets, the hotels like this. I kept wondering, if electricity goes right now out of Uganda, how will it affect the 70% of the people we talk about in the rural areas? In other words, how many, or in terms of percentages, how many households in Uganda are accessing electricity? Because it's their tax that is being used to generate this electricity. So we need, when we are talking of economic development or growth in the country, increase in per capita income, my interpretation, we should be looking at the economic development going hand in hand with human development. Okay. Because, and then when you talked of roads, I've seen roads in Uganda are like almost strategically constructed. We saw extractivism in the Albertine, we are talking of first-class roads. So, and yet last week, along my road to West Nile, I found a lady who was a pregnant woman on a bicycle who was delivering on the roadside, on a very rough road. So how do we translate all this development to a local person? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We cannot be able to have all of us ask. Our time is really out. But before we get to the panelists responding, I would request to have Mr. Ernest Rubondo, kindly, the Executive Director, Petroleum Authority of Uganda, to just give us a brief overview and a synopsis on the oil development, because, I mean, we're talking about oil. We're all anxious and excited about the oil, but what's there for us? What are the prospects? I do request, I'll give him about 3-5 minutes. Mr. Rubondo, please.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think it's fair that I start by thanking the Ministry of Finance for the progress they are making in the budget process. I've been in the government for a long time, but clearly the clarity and the process of budgeting is improving to the extent of even having engagements after it has been read. Congratulations. My task is very small. I take it to really share with the audience the progress, where we are at oil exploration, and maybe a bit of where we're going in the 3 to 5 minutes you have given me. I would like to start by saying that the oil exploration sector in the country is growing in two directions, both horizontally and vertically, and I'll explain why. Horizontally is, many of you will know that maybe I should stand up. Yeah, many of you will know that about 21 oil fields were discovered in the country, and efforts are being made to produce oil from those fields. And that is one aspect of the oil and gas sector. Some of you will also know that there are new areas which the government licensed in 2017 to 2 oil companies, and those companies are exploring for oil. That's another aspect. Some of you will also know that last month the government announced 5 areas for new companies to come in and start exploring. So the vertical growth that I'm saying is that the country has areas where oil has been found and they are being taken forward for development and production. It has areas which it has licensed and exploration is going on, and we are all hopeful that more oil will be found. And it also has areas which are going to be licensed out to new investors. That represents growth of the oil and gas sector in the country. The vertical growth that I'm talking about is in the areas where oil was discovered and found viable. In those areas, the vertical growth is that in the country, we are now taking forward a process of producing and developing that oil, which I want to explain. That is vertical growth because it is bringing new aspects that have not been in the country. Where we are now is that out of the 21 fields that were discovered, 14 are commercial.
News Updates is brought to you by DFCU Agent Banking.
Parliament's Committee on Commission, Statutory Authorities and State Enterprises questions officials from the Civil Aviation Authority regarding the ongoing expansion works of Entebbe International Airport. Also coming up, Quarter quits a man who attacked the Bishop of Namirembe during Easter prayers on mental health grounds. And Iran has shot down a U.S. drone, raising fears of a major military confrontation between Tehran and Washington in the Gulf.
Enjoy accessible, convenient, and friendly banking services with DFCU Agent Banking, because we are making more possible.